welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell. This week, Rose and I are very excited to welcome Gundi Rhoades to Earth Feels. Gundi lives in New South Wales, Australia. She's a veterinarian, and she recently had an opinion piece published in the Sydney Morning Herald entitled, "Cattle Have Stopped Breeding, Koalas Die of Thirst, a Vet's Hellish Diary of Climate Change." So let's jump right in.
Gundi Rhoades, you're a vet in New South Wales. Mm-hmm. And you want to tell us a little bit about, I know you've been in Inverell for like 23 years, is that right?
Yeah, since 1997, 22 years.
Okay.
Yes.
And you've got a little German accent going on there. So how long have you been in Australia?
22 years.
Okay, so you came right to Inverell.
Inverell, yes, which happened through love, as things happen. You know, like I'm German. I studied in Germany, and when I was qualified, I went to England straight away and lived there for 7 years, and worked as a veterinarian, and that's when I met my husband, and he was an Aussie from Inverell, from a cattle property, and of course that fitted really nicely, you know, to have a veterinarian and a cattle breeder. And little did I know the story that would wait for me. However, you know, 22 years later, you know, I am still here.
I read your article and it was so devastating. I felt like I had to talk to you.
Yes, and it is devastating. You know, it's just heartbreaking. It's hard to imagine when you're not in it. I would have never understood it. You know, you can't really describe it with words, what it's like to drive through this parched landscape and to live in it and to have, you know, the sky is, I'm in my clinic, you know, and the sky is smoky again, but at least it doesn't hurt your eyes today. It's not strong enough, but yeah, it's just, Australia is just burning up.
So what's the temp there now? And where you are, what's the temperature?
Today, it's not super hot, you know, so it's probably about 33 now.
Celsius,
so
yes. So is that about...
American, so she thinks in Fahrenheit.
I think 104 was a really high fever. And that's what it was yesterday, you know, about 42 degrees. And in Penrith, in Sydney yesterday, it was 48.5. So I'm a medical person. So my top degree that life is possible is 42 degrees. You know, like my little dog here. Let me show you, Primrose.
Hi, Primrose. Can you
see her? She's a whippet, and I inadvertently, I like telling this story because I inadvertently locked her in my car last summer, about not quite a year ago, and she overheated. I didn't know she was in there. By the time I found her, her body temperature was 43 degrees.
Wow.
And so that's, let's say 105 or 106 instead of 104, which is the top fever temperature. And she
do dogs run about the same as humans in terms of?
Yeah, just a couple of degrees higher than us, but our cut-off point, you know, like in centigrade, 42 degrees is the maximum fever. After that, you know, when you've got a child or a person, you like in the movies, you know, when they boil up people above that temperature, life is actually not possible.
In Inverell, it's very, very dry. According to your article, you said that there's like the trees, it's been so dry for so long that there's no moisture in the leaves.
No moisture in the leaves whatsoever. It's on my own property, the dams are dry, and they were the biggest, best dams. They have never been dry. You know, this whole district has an unprecedented drought. It's never been like this, ever. The old people here that I talk to, you know, a lot of my farming clients, they will tell me about creeks that they would go and watch the fish in and go fishing. They are all dead. The river has dried up. The gum trees are dying, and they are, I've got some here in the background. These guys here, in the middle, of town, they don't look too bad. As soon as you go out of town, they are all literally gray, dropping their leaves. You can drive through the district now and you can see houses or rock formations that you've never seen before. And the landscape, this is why it's burning so hot in this country now. We've got really, really hot temperatures, and it's never been so dry. It's record low rainfall.
How long has the drought been happening?
They creep up on you, but I remember the last rainfall 2 years ago at Christmas Day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we had maybe 3 or 4 little showers. We had about 10 millimeters the other day, which is, now that there is no grass in the landscape, the rain falls on and it just either runs off or it just doesn't even hit the ground. It's just dust. It's unbelievable when you see it. And in spring we had the hottest days where I would drive around and I would stop and film it, actually, because we had hot winds in spring where you can hardly sort of like can't hear yourself anymore because the wind is so strong, and that takes the last bit of topsoil and whips it up. And then even New Zealand has got our topsoil now. There's nothing on the ground anymore that actually holds the grass there. And then it'll take a lot of rain for a long time, because now we get a little bit of rain, it hits the ground is sometimes 50 degrees hot. That is, I don't know how much in Fahrenheit. So it just evaporates. A few hours later, you don't even know that it has rained anymore. So the problem is a very deep one now.
Yes. So from your medical background, your science background, and the fact that you're in Australia surrounded by the drought and by the fires, what do you want people who are listening to this podcast, what do you want to tell them? I mean, we're going to have a link to your article, and Rose has read portions of that already. Again, that's very well written, and I hope people will go to that. But what do you want to say to people who can't really imagine? I mean, I'm up in Canada right now. We do Celsius here, so it's -4, and we've got snow on the ground.
This is absolutely unprecedented, and the drought and the dryness in the whole country makes that the bushfires burn with such a ferocity, that it's apocalyptic. It's like an inferno. It's like you hear about fireballs that just jump 500 meters, and the fires creating their own thunderstorms. So it is absolutely crazy. It feels like as if the world is coming to an end. It really does here in Australia. The koalas around me, which I wrote about, the wildlife is suffering so much. There's nothing in the leaves anymore. They're dying. And poor things, like the koalas, that's what got the firemen, koalas screeching while they're getting burned, And then you can say, thank you, leadership, and thank you, greedy world and corporations, for knowing the truth and not doing anything about it, and you have got blood on your hands. So do we all, may I say so.
We've all been complicit up till now. So now that we know, what do we do? And that's the next step.
Yeah. I have to tell this story, on my next door neighbor, a koala was right in front of her house, came down the tree. She went there with a pot of water, and the koala held the water and drank for about an hour and a half. And my friend Libby was sitting with the koala. They are normally not. We don't see them because they're hiding.
Very reticent. They
are just somewhere up in the trees. But now you can see them up there because the leaves are so sparse, but they come down because they don't have moisture. And that's when I had one in the middle of the road, throwing itself on its back, stretching out its arms, like pick me up. And a couple of young guys brought it into me to the clinic, and I tried to save it and it died overnight. They just go into kidney failure. And my friend, with the pot of water, she said the koala was holding her hand and it was not letting go. Like she said, she just, the whole time she was sitting with the koala, she was just apologizing. She just said, I am so sorry, because people that know, we know that humans have done this. You know, like we cannot spit 110 million tons of fossil fuel a day, 110 million tons a day into the atmosphere, and then expect it not to do anything, you know. And so the whole concept of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, it's the biggest part of the story. There are other parts of the story that are hardly ever getting mentioned, and one is water vapor, one is pollution itself, and one is nitrous oxide, you know, and then a little bit of methane, you know, but these are the greenhouse gases. And if anybody doubts this science, because we live in countries, you know, where there's a lot of climate change deniers, then I would like to ask them to look at Mercury and at Venus, you know, the two planets. And Mercury hasn't got an atmosphere at all. So it is about, you know, like nearly down to the absolute zero at night and up to 450 degrees Celsius, which is compared to Fahrenheit, it's about double what you have got your oven on when you've got your oven on really hot. Yeah, so lead will melt. So that's a planet without an atmosphere, you know, completely dependent on the sun radiation coming in and going out, and no protection by an atmosphere either. And then you've got Venus on the other hand, which has got a really thick atmosphere, which is 96% carbon dioxide, where the temperature is all day, every day, day and night, 450 degrees plus, again, which makes lead melt, you know, so life is not possible. And that's what we are adding to our atmosphere every day, 110 million ton a day, by digging out fossil fuels. So of course it's going to do something, you know, we know that it reacts as a greenhouse gas, and it's quite easy to understand, you know, when you go that way. The second biggest emitter of carbon dioxide of nitrous oxide, you know, of greenhouse gases, is actually agriculture. And our countries are very, very guilty, you know, more guilty than Europe, for example, because we have large areas, the largest part of our agricultural land are chemically farmed. So we've done this illogical thing where we put, you know, you in America used to have 50 million bison and 10 million elk and 10 million other ruminants. They were happily going up and down the countryside and creating your prairies, you know, with really fertile ground.
Right. Well, and pooping everywhere, and their hooves were mixing into the soil, and everything was rich, and
Yeah, you know, and now you have got 50 million cattle locked up in feedlots, and you use the rest of the country with chemically farmed, producing grain that cattle are not meant to eat anyway, because they get too acidic in their rumens, so they get sick. So then they need antibiotics constantly, you know, to not die from the acidosis, you know, and that's when we then eat and then, you know, so the whole concept is just stupid, you know, like cattle in grasslands, like you had the bison, were actually carbon sequesters. They would help with drawing down carbon. They increase fertility in the soil. Yeah, they're really good stuff. You know? So cattle in grasslands produce really healthy food. And if I look at my own farm, once I start talking, I really start talking. So I'm so passionate about it. You know, like my farm, which is a cattle producing farm, when it does rain, is a really healthy ecosystems. You know, cattle farmers in grasslands, not feedlots. That's a completely different system. You know, in grasslands, you know, the fertility should increase if you have rotational grazing. So we mimic the bisons, you know, as they would have gone through the American landscape. And then we can sequester carbon into the ground by the grass is growing, the cattle come and eat it, you know. So then the grass wakes up again to being in a state of growing. So it grows again, the cattle come back again, they eat it, you know, and that is, you know, I always do this sort of movement, you know, every time green grass, anything photosynthesizes, it pumps sugars into the ground, which is actively taking out carbon out of the atmosphere, putting it down there. Right. Feeding the microbes, growing itself, then it comes and gets eaten, you know. So we've got this beautiful pumping action of taking the carbon, you know, and everything, biodiversity, soil life, fertility of the ground, all increases all the time. So that's a pretty healthy system, you know. And on my farm, I have got egrets and herons and eagles and small mammals and kangaroos and echidnas and koalas, you know, and birds, and it's just not toxic. But when you go onto chemical farming land where we have got large monocultures, not a tree in sight, Everything farmed with chemicals. And
Chemicals.
this is where the problem is. And the chemicals, so this is where climate change comes in. And it's a concept that I would like the world to actually know, because this is, when I've, finish my logical circle, that's what every person on this planet can actively do to reverse climate change and to help the planet. So in chemical farming systems, the glyphosate, 8.6 billion tons we have put out onto the planet on genetically modified crops, especially in Australia and America.
Yep.
Other chemicals like 2,4-D or paraquat. All of those chemicals are so harmful to human health, and we are just finding that out now. And you've got a brilliant doctor out there in America called Dr. Zach Bush. If you haven't heard from him, check him out. Fantastic scientist, fantastic man. He talks like I do, about the connection between soil and health. And I could talk for about hours on that alone. The concept of chemicals put on millions of hectares. Yeah,
right.
We're talking of millions of hectares. If you fly over the US, you see millions of hectares.
Yeah,
of
the whole prairie line, the whole midland, the whole prairie lands. Yeah.
So all of that gets chemicals on it, which is harmful to human health, but it's also harmful to the microbes in the soil, which are incidentally the same microbes that we've got in our gut. Yeah, so we kill them with the glyphosate. So all those soils are sterile. And when they are sterile and all the microbes die, they emit carbon heavily. And then you get nitrous and phosphorus fertilizers on there, which again kill the microbes. And nitrous oxide gets puffed into the air. And that is the greenhouse gas that is 300 times as strong as CO2. Yeah, so this is where agriculture is so guilty. The birds, the bees, we know that we will not be able to live without the bees.
Right.
The pesticides are insecticides and herbicides.
You're saying that agriculture is a huge culprit. And so
but it's
is
also
that reverse? Exactly. So talk about the reverse, Gundi.
Yes, this is, you've got it. This is the brilliance of nature, because it's also, agriculture is really the biggest savior of all. So when you go into organic systems, where these poisons are not allowed, then you have fertile ground, which is just such a no-brainer in a way, because, the plants photosynthesize, they push the sugar into the ground. That makes the fungi and the bacteria live. And the bacteria are the ones, they multiply every 20 minutes. You do your maths, from one bacteria, in 6 hours, you have got 256,000, so that's biomass. And then they will die, and that creates, with digestion of the stubble and the grass and the poo and the pea, that creates this magic substance called humus. And we just recently here, Woolworths supermarkets, which has a lot to answer for, but this was brilliant. They gave out little seed pots to people, and they had it was like a coin, only about, let's say, 3-4 millimeters thick, a little tablet of soil, and all the kids could do it. They could just put water on, and you could see, really, really high organic matter soil, and within 1 minute it was from here to it increased by 15 times. And that is the power of organic systems, that you have got so much water holding capacity, and then your fertility starts to pump, and then the microbes can produce their alkaloids, their amino acids. They make the minerals in the ground soluble so that the plant can bring it, take it in. So when you go into biological farming, so let's say you make the decision that you eat organic. Yeah. So then that, or let's say you buy this organic egg. So the chicken that produced the egg will be happy, because in organic farming systems, you don't have batteries. They have to be outside. They are allowed to roam. So the chicken is happy, which makes me feel good when I eat its egg. And then the chicken has to eat something. So it eats grain, and that grain is produced on an organic farm. So the farmer doesn't get sick of poisons. Which is another subject. The farmers are terribly sick, and I could tell you stories. I hear them every day. The soil is alive. It can absorb carbon rather than emit it. So it becomes from an emitter into a sequester, and that's what nature always has done. And that is the natural balance, because you don't put poisons on. The fungi can live, the bees can live, the birds can live, and you have got some chance of having humans being healthy again.
So you're living, I mean, I think we're all looking toward you and seeing what's coming, right? You guys have, you guys are a first world nation. And I think there's been climate refugees in other parts of the world, but now it's kind of hitting first world nation. And so you, in your country, there's still climate deniers. I mean, obviously Scott Morrison, not exactly. Very similar to our leader.
Your leader, Rose.
Sorry, not hers. Not hers.
Our countries are very similar, you know. In the agriculture, you know, chemical agriculture, Europe is much smarter. The trouble is, you know, like I always say, nobody gets out of bed in the morning to kill off a planet or to make yet another child autistic or to have the neighbor down the road get breast cancer. Sadly, you know, in our countries, this scientific issue, you know, has actually been politicized. You know, it's been feminized, politicized, you know, so it's the misogynistic 70-year-old white male breadwinner mentality, you know, that really can't handle, you know, the truth, you know, of what we're doing. So what would be just a scientific conclusion, you know, of what we are doing has been made so politic in the media.
A lot of people making a lot of money from the system. And the system
that's right. And it's all coming out now. And the opinions are slowly changing. You know, I was afraid for a long time in this little community to say that I absolutely believe in climate change. Actually, I don't believe. I know. Yes. You know,
you were
it's not
afraid.
A belief.
Yeah, you were afraid.
So I was afraid. Yeah. So now the opinions are changing. But I had a conversation yesterday with a farmer, a young man, and a lot of farmers have not gone to universities. But even if they have gone to universities, they are again sponsored by Monsanto and you know, agri-tech companies. So they don't actually know. It's like the medical doctors don't know because they don't get taught about nutrition. We do get taught about nutrition, but we are still, as veterinarians, really selling a lot of commercial dog food. You know, so a lot of the things I have found out since my mom had cancer when I was 20, you know, so that's 33 years ago. So I have, you know, I've lived with nutrition, health, whole food, real whole grain, you know, organics for a long, long time. And it's done my body good, you know, because I'm fit as a fiddle, you know, I'm 53, my children are all healthy. So it's served me well, you know, to have made that change a long time ago. And so my knowledge has just increased. But, you know, this young farmer, for example, and I think he is just typical for most of the farmers. He says, I don't know how to, you tell me that glyphosate is so bad, but he says, I don't know how to farm in any other way. And that is a conversation we have to get away from, even maybe talking about climate change. Yeah, when we want to have farmers change for the benefit of us and the planet, you know, and the wildlife, and have the conversation. Okay, your soils are becoming infertile. You have to have more inputs. You have to spend more money. How could I teach you to do this differently? You know, and because they are getting the message,
it isn't working.
Right.
It's not working. Yeah. And
so it's re-educating some of these guys. I mean, well,
re-educating all of them. You know, he said yesterday, I know my neighbor, you know, that farm, he says, that farm has got cancer, I'm sure. You know, we just buried a 34-year-old woman with a really expressive breast cancer. They've got 2 young children. Now, yesterday I heard the husband now has got cancer. He is 34 years old as well.
Wow.
So they live on the farm and they spray as well, you know, they're contract sprayers.
Right.
And then he said, I'm sure that farm has got cancer because the people before that, they both died of cancer too. You know, so people are looking now, you know, and they're seeing the connections, and it's starting to change. You know, it's hitting us so hard.
I thought it was a really good point that you made in your article, that farmers work really hard and they're resilient, and it's time to sort of use those qualities to address the issues.
Teach.
Yes.
Yeah, because they really do not know. And Monsanto is not going to go out there and tell them.
You touched on a while ago about what individuals, the one thing that individuals can do. So do you want to share with our listeners what you would say if they were going to do one thing? What would it be?
Yeah. Go and eat organic. That's Yeah, it's really easy. In a nutshell, when you eat organic, you support the whole organic industry, and it's amazing how many even really, really smart people I talk to, even people that are in naturopaths or, health professionals, the connection, that actually everybody gets it, that organic will be better for you, that your food is more nutrient dense and that you avoid the pesticides and the chemicals. But hardly anybody makes the connection between I eat organic, I save the planet. Yeah. So I always say, you will save the planet one bite at a time, because you will actually be part of the system that will put the carbon back into the ground, and it's better for you anyway.
I think we need to make a date for you to talk again. I'd really like you to keep us updated on what's going on just in your community and your thoughts in general. You have a very personal view of what's going on with the planet, but you also have a global view because of your background. And so
and the depth of the science that is really informative for everybody, because we need to be hearing that from the science community. Okay, well, we're thinking of you guys and holding you in love and light and prayers and whatever. I know that people are wanting to donate. Is there some place that people can help out with funds? Or are you guys?
We are just, I'm personally here fine. And the sad truth is my koalas here are all dead. I have got even hardly any to treat anymore. And the platypuses, which have been here for 120 million years, they don't have any water. They will all be dead. I don't even see them. But with the fires down south, I'm a member of an organization called Vets for Climate Action.
Vets for Climate Action.
And there is now veterinarians down south, which I might be able to, via Facebook, give you a link. And they probably need money because they've got a lot of burned animals there.
Okay.
That would be wonderful.
Great.
That would be great. That would be great. All right. So we'll be able to provide that link for people that are interested in helping the animals. Okay.
So good to talk to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So we've got our action tip from Gundi. Eat more organic food, or she would say only organic food if possible. And I know sometimes it's difficult on a budget, but it is the beginning of the year, and often that's a time when we sit down and plan our budgets for the year. So consider, is there a way to incorporate more organic food in your diet? And we're going to include a link to an article that gives tips on eating organic on a budget. And what is the good news in the middle of all of this? Well, people in Australia are taking to the streets like they never have before, demanding action on climate change. And they're fed up with their prime minister's inaction on this issue. And there were 10,000 people out in Melbourne alone one day earlier this week. So that's the good news among all of the difficult news about what's going on in Australia. And as for a sanity tip, in a time when climate effects are beginning to be felt more and more, it's time for some group therapy like never before. This is not a time to be silent. This is a time to reach out and share with your friends and family what the impact of climate change is having on your mental health. If you're feeling climate grief, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. And you can always go over to the Earth Feels Facebook page and share your thoughts there as well. We'd love to hear them.
That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me. You see, your mother, she has been suffering. and the truth is told beneath the sea.